Maybe. But as I watched the smoke rise, disappearing into the clear blue sky, I didn't feel cold. I felt warm. I felt light. You cannot build a future on a rotten foundation. Sometimes, you have to let the whole thing collapse so you can build something real on top of the ruins. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like freedom. So, here is my question to you, Preston. Sorry, Colton is currently sleeping on a friend's couch. My parents are likely going to spend the rest of their lives paying off debts. They say family is everything, and that I should have sacrificed my hard work to save them. Did I go too far? Or did I finally give them exactly what they earned? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed seeing justice served cold, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I have a lot more stories to tell, and trust me, the walls of this house have heard everything.